So at that time, black police officers couldn't work with white police officers, and they could only work one division. There's opportunities to really kind of set things straight and take a stand for what you believe in.
Yeah, no, totally. Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here with your host, the IA guy. Even though I keep saying all of our guests are special, this one in particular happens to be someone that I met through Commander Kyle Jackson. I just happened to actually see him in the commander's office. They were discussing something along the lines of leadership and as it relates to whistleblowing when you have all these situations that happen in a workplace. It's super, super important. We don't talk about it enough. And John Mutz was kind enough to show up and give us his experience. And I got to tell you, I'm taking you back to, I suppose, the mid-'70s to the late '70s into the '80s. So, John Mutz. Captain, thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Let me ask you just something like right off that has nothing to do with internal affairs. Why do you think that the LAPD is the only agency that came up with these codes while everybody else has these 10 codes? Did you ever wonder that?
No, I always wondered that because I was in law enforcement before I came on the LAPD.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't the same code, So when I came on the LAPD, I had learned our new code.
That's right.
So I actually never wondered about it. I was just a good soldier and learned it. That's all.
You were a good soldier, and God, I really appreciate it. I'm fascinated to hear these old, these stories that happened way back, because we'll get into a trip down memory lane later on when you came out on June of 1974. But before we get started, you and I have been discussing this internal affairs process, if you will, and you have so much experience in it. So I got to ask you about when you came in the academy in 1974. Back in those days, did anybody from internal affairs show up and kind of tell you a little bit about the functions, or when you were on probation, did any of your field training officers tell you what internal affair does, or are they meet? And the reason why I ask is it's till this very day we're looked so negative in the eyes of our partners. So what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, there was no mention of internal affairs when I was in the academy.
Okay.
When I was in the academy, it was the long academy. It was 6 months, but there was no mention of it. I first heard about internal affairs when I actually got to the field, as a rookie probationer, In '77 was a unique kind of division. I mean, it was too big. We hadn't built a station, so 77th had a huge responsibility for service, and a very negative reputation with the community. And so internal affairs was down in 77th almost on a daily basis, investigating complaints against police officers. So my training officers warned me about any contact with internal affairs.
So they told you, just don't even deal with these guys because they're just bad people.
Yeah, exactly. And they're after your job.
They're after your job.
So keep in mind that that's the risk that you have when you're being interviewed.
Right. Would it be fair to say that back in those days, they were just unheard of? They were nowhere near any patrol division, or you just didn't even know who they were.
Right. No.
Yeah. Following up with this question, Captain, what about, let me paint the scenario for you. If you're in a room full of sergeants and they're getting ready to begin their assignment in internal affairs, what's the one thing you would want them to know about their job?
I think the most important thing is to be fair, and to not presume that you know what happened.
Okay.
And that you that you listen from a point of view as to what's really being said. And I think, one of the most important things is, and this is not in internal affairs training, before the recorder is placed on, and you're recorded, your statement's recorded, make sure that you are going to tell the truth. And if you don't know something, say you don't know it. And I say that because the internal affairs investigator can create the context, for the interview.
They can manipulate it.
Yeah, because you got to remember, the officer in the hot seat has heard rumors and gossips about internal affairs, even names of internal affairs investigators.
Right.
So when you're investigating, understand that this is out there and try to create a context where you're really trying to get to what happened.
Captain, you've worked in internal affairs. I got to ask you this: do you think that job is to protect cops?
No, not at all. I think you have to remember that the roots of the LAPD were in corruption, and internal affairs was created to root out corrupt cops. And so that is the very foundation of the culture.
Got it. And so when you work this assignment, let me ask you this: would you prefer? I suppose it's not so much of a preference. I understand you got to have integrity, be fair, don't be biased and all that good stuff. But wouldn't you want someone that probably has gone through the system to work that spot?
I think so. I mean, having that experience, training is important and all that, and mentoring, but actually having the experience really kind of informs you about, what's going on in your chair as the investigator and what's going on in the other chair for the person you're interviewing.
Someone asked me this, say, hey, did you lose friends when you went to IA? You worked IA for just a short period of time. What was that like?
Oh, man.
Did you get asked to go? Or
Yeah, I got told that I needed to do a tour in internal affairs to be able to promote up.
Okay.
And so that was my incentive of going to internal affairs. I didn't have an interest in internal affairs. I thought that it just wasn't the kind of job that I wanted to do. I knew it was important to do, and and I know, how to do, I knew how that it was, how to right to do it, how to do it right, but. I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting you say that, because I was just asked by a host of a podcast about, did you want her to go into internal affairs? And I can tell you, and I never really thought about it until I got asked. And basically, and maybe you can agree to this, but I was a Sergeant 1, obviously, because I got promoted to Sergeant, but in this culture in LAPD is like, you want to get your rocker.
Yeah.
You want to get your Sergeant 2 spot. And Sergeant 2 spots are very hard to come by.
They are. Very competitive.
Very competitive. And so I suppose my mind was more like, okay, I got to get this rocker and get this upgrade. It's like a promotion. It's an upgrade, more so than just working that assignment. But I realized that it was an eye-opener, if you will.
I was just talking to a young man before our interview, and he played professional basketball. And one of the things he said is, when that game starts, all you care about is winning. And I think that translates into things like internal affairs and accountability, criminal cases as well. It's got to be more than just about winning.
Let me ask you this: so did you feel as though some people did that assignment to win cases?
Yeah, clearly. I mean,
was that the culture kind of like?
Yeah, there's a range of internal affairs investigators. I mean, we had a good sized number of investigators, and today I understand there's even more. And
yes.
In that range, you'll have people who are more interested in winning and getting a notch on their belt, to rather than did I really interact fairly and reasonably
Protect the system.
Yeah, protect the system, instead of me winning.
Interesting you say that. I take it we're going back to in the 80s. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the 80s.
Yeah, during the 80s. And unfortunately, it's 2024, and I'm willing to bet that out of the 100, 200, I want to say there's probably 200 plus in internal affairs and LAPD. And sadly enough, there's probably some individuals that what you describe are still doing that job. So yeah, well, you know what? Somehow, some way, we're going to try to change culture, and one of many reasons to do this particular podcast, and hopefully, whoever's watching and listening can kind of get an idea of, hey, if you're going to do this type of function, do it for all the right reasons.
Right.
A trip down memory lane. This is my favorite part because you came in the academy in June of 1974. You retired in 1999. I didn't get to know you because I started my probation in January of 1999. But let me ask you, well, first and foremost, you made captain, so you were a field training officer, right? You were a detective. You made sergeant and lieutenant.
Sergeant and lieutenant.
And then, congratulations, you made captain in 1989.
Yes.
You were in Foothill Division as a captain.
I was.
And Rodney King happened.
Yes, it did.
And before we started recording, you were telling me something along the lines like, look, this incident happened. It's been recorded. And what happened after that?
Well, I asked to see the lieutenant who informed me about it been taped, and it looked really bad. I asked, of course, to see it. I'd only been in Foothill for like two and a half weeks, 3 weeks, and I didn't know everybody,
Okay.
And when he mentioned the names, I knew of their names, but that's all I knew. And part of your job as a patrol captain is to get to know everybody, and so I was at a loss. I had read the reports by the sergeant in charge at the beating scene, and his sergeant's log was confusing. I mean, it just, I had a lot of questions, so many that I actually called him, and said, what happened out there? And he told me, well, it was just a standard kind of thing, and we did what we needed to do, and everything is okay. And I said, it doesn't sound okay. And then we would learn that it was
wasn't
not
okay.
No, it was not okay.
It was okay
It was
at
an
all.
understatement. It was not okay.
It was so not okay
God.
that you were transferred out.
Yeah, ultimately, coincidentally, I had learned about a process or a system to upgrade leadership.
Okay.
And I'd learned it from Northrop Aircraft, that builds all the, tremendous fighter aircraft. And so they're really into making sure there's quality. So we were translating that into policing. So, when you have a horrendous event like this, what do? Well, there was what the department wanted to do, and there was what we wanted to do. We actually wanted to go to the community, acknowledge that this was a horrendous event, and it didn't represent, the rank and file of the police department.
Yeah.
And so that was a dilemma because it conflicted with the top LAPD leadership at the time.
Right. And then what ended up happening?
Well, I insisted that we go to the community and own what we did, and that wasn't the strategy at the top. The strategy at the top was, this is just an aberration. This is not reflective of the LAPD, and our decision to go to the Monadnock stick. So I was then transferred out to another assignment, and someone else was put in there to continue the leadership narrative.
Right. And so here you are at the other assignment, Van Nuys Division, and the verdict comes out.
Yeah, a year later, the verdict comes out, and of course, it paralyzes paralyzes the LAPD's top leadership, and it was just a shock. and it created big divisions. Many black officers did not support the verdict, and many white officers did too. But there was a portion of officers who supported the not guilty verdict, right, for a range of reasons, not just to, that they get off, but they understood that there had been some training issues and discipline issues that had contributed to Rodney King.
Before I forget, Captain, you were a young cop in the late 70s, early 80s. I've been meaning to ask you, was there a lot of division back then in terms of racism, or just, it wasn't really any parity? Was there more white officers, less females, Latinos, blacks?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until 1982 or so that the LAPD came under a consent decree that forced them to hire represented numbers of African Americans, women, and Latinos.
Right.
So up until then, there was, acknowledgement that they had to diversify, but no real investment in it. So that created quite a shift for the LAPD. Unfortunately, those newer members, the recruits, African Americans, women, and Latinos, the culture really wasn't ready to accept them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think so?
Why do I think so?
That they weren't ready.
The LAPD. Well, first of all, the LAPD didn't integrate until 1956.
Okay.
And they were forced to integrate. And the chief at the time, his heart was not in integration. So at that time, black police officers couldn't work with white police officers, and they could only work one division, Newton Division. And the same thing was going on with the fire department, where a black firefighter couldn't ride an engine with a white firefighter.
Oh, wow.
This is 1956.
Right.
So, fast forward to 1982, there is still a lot going on in terms of bias and discrimination and so on like that. Yes, we are diversifying. However, it's a rocky road.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a big challenge, a tall order to change that culture. I totally 100% agree with you. What's the one judge? So here's a captain. We're going to talk about when you were captain in 1989. And before I forget, so the verdict happens like around 5 p.m. or so, 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. on that day. And you're, like you said, you said it best, it paralyzes this city. Let me ask you this, Captain. Do you think that we, LAPD, was prepared for this verdict and the riots that happened right after the verdict?
Well, there was a lot of conversation of how the LAPD was prepared. I, as a captain, I didn't see it. I think there was preparation, conversations at the top, but they didn't seem to go down to my leadership level, and certainly to the rank and file.
Would it be fair to say that your colleagues share that sentiment, that no one was really ready?
Yeah, I think that was kind of a common place. This idea, the LAPD is raised that if we just have enough people there, we can calm things down and get order. What we learned is there's not enough police officers out there to do that. When the community, when a portion of the community is so enraged. So I think it was shocking and humiliating for the police department, for many, embarrassed that there was not the kind of action that could have been helpful, and there was not the kind of ownership for the failure.
No, totally. The city, 3 days of it just completely
and the rank
burned.
and file, they took the brunt of it.
Yeah.
The people out there on the street took the brunt of it.
Yeah. We'll save all that, the Rodney King incident, for another conversation.
Yeah, there's quite a story.
Yeah,
to it.
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I will ask you this: if I were to put you in a time capsule, right, and right before you retired in 1999, what's the one job or the one assignment in any of these ranks that you wish you did, but you never got a chance to do it?
I think I always was intrigued with the helicopters, and in some of my assignments, I was in helicopters going here and going there. I always thought that was like the greatest job on the LAPD is being a pilot of a helicopter or an observer.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to see the city.
I can only imagine.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and we can both agree that once you get that assignment, you never want to leave.
No, those when you get there, it's hard to get there, but when you get there, you never leave.
Yeah, totally.
It's a great job.
Okay, let's go with Anaya's story here.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving on. You were a captain, and just we'll set the parameters here. As a captain, sometimes you get chosen to be a board member for a border rights hearing. Okay, and we've been talking, and you told me there was about 3 or 4 border rights hearings where you were chosen to be one of the members.
Well, I was chosen to be an advocate for about 4.
Okay.
But I was on many boards of rights.
Right.
He's either a member or a chairman.
Okay, and I take it the one termination case, were you the advocate? Is that what it was?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so you did the job that I did, and gosh, I can definitely share your sentiment how to prepare. So here you are as a sergeant, and you put on this case, right? This incident. You start telling the board about, hey, let me tell you about this case, and that one kind of sticks out more than any of the ones.
Yeah, it was a regret that I had. I didn't aspire to be an advocate in the internal affairs anyway. I got ordered to be the advocate, as you know.
You got chosen.
Yeah, I got chosen.
They call that voluntold nowadays.
Exactly. So, it's a complex job, and I think it takes years, to be a really good advocate. And so I didn't have all that time, and then I got a really tough case. This case that
What was it about?
Well, it was about a detective, old-time detective, who, on his lunch break in a police car, collided with a member of the community.
Okay.
And damaged his car.
Okay.
So the detective got out and verbally attacked this driver and told him just to go away, and it was his fault. It was actually the detective's fault.
Okay.
And it turned out the detective was under the influence of alcohol.
Okay.
He was, instead of eating his lunch, he was drinking his lunch. So he tells this guy to go away. He comes back to the station, but the driver comes in and says, hey, I just had an accident. This guy crashed into me. He's a police officer here, and I want to make a complaint. So that generated all kinds of things going on and led to this detective having to take a GCI, alcohol test. And he came back over the limit.
Wow. Okay.
And so they checked his car. His police car had damage and all that kind of stuff, and he was not cooperative. And it was his second or third DUI. This was the first time on duty.
Okay.
And so I got that case.
Okay.
To prosecute.
Okay. So here you are, and what were the challenges?
Well, the challenge is, I had worked this division myself as a young rookie.
Okay. And
so I knew quite a few people there. And they called me and said, hey, this guy, go easy on him. Don't try to take him down. He's got a problem. And he'd been around a long time. People respected him, but he was just a disagreeable guy. I mean, just to put it mildly. So he comes to the hearing, and we make the case. I present the facts, and they're overwhelming. I mean, there's no doubt about this whole thing. I mean, the person he hit in the community was very credible,
Yeah.
and thought the detective was in the wrong. And so got the detective on the stand to, for his defense, and he totally shot himself in the foot. I mean, he was angry about the whole thing,
Oh, wow.
didn't take ownership, all kinds of stuff. And I'm listening to this guy, and I'm going, stop. You're
making it worse.
You're making it much worse than it is. And couldn't stop him. And so I ended my cross-examination of him.
Okay.
And the board felt that I had ended it too early and didn't come after him more. So they cross-examined him, and it was the same kind of thing. It was terrible. And it ended up him, being fired.
Wow.
He lost his job.
And you did mention something about being regretful.
Yeah.
Why is it that you feel that you were regretful?
Marlon, when my experience is, when a police officer loses his job, her job, it's devastating. Yeah. It is devastating. Wearing that badge for most officers is an honor, a privilege, and means a lot to them. It means a lot to their family.
Yes.
So when you see someone lose their job, it's a regret. In this case, hopefully, this detective went on and got sober
and got better
and got healthy again and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to lose his job, it's regretful.
Yeah, you know what, Captain, I share that sentiment with you completely, knowing that an officer facing serious allegations of misconduct, in this case being a DUI, and it wasn't just his first, and on duty under those circumstances, and when I hear the verdict, you're being removed, I couldn't help but to just feel like, what did I accomplish?
Yeah.
Or what role am I playing into this, this horrible situation from, into this colleague of mine who's about to go home and he lost everything.
Yeah, and in his case, we know problem drinking, alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah,
it's an addiction. So, knowing that, what can we do? What's the best option?
Right, termination's one of the things, but how can we ensure that he's not going to be continuing to drink alcohol and have this problem? I totally agree. Any alcohol-related issues, those are really tough to deal with. Absolutely, 100%. Now, let me switch the hats for you. Now you're a captain.
Mm-hmm.
When you were a captain, you got to adjudicate these complaints.
Right.
Any challenges with that, or can you share with us one particular IA that you had to make an adjudication, a decision that you just felt as though this is just not the right thing to do, or you had some challenges with your bosses, the commanders and bureau and all that?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there were a number of them, as a captain.
So it wasn't just one?
Yeah, no. The discipline system is very necessary, but it has a history of not fulfilling, its mission, And in the process, the LAPD has a system where the captain can write a recommendation for a penalty based on the facts of the investigation, and then it goes up the chain of command, I think to 3 different levels. So my immediate boss was a deputy chief in charge of a bureau, and he had been around a long time, to say the least. Maybe too long. And so there was an incident on the graveyard shift where the lieutenant in charge, who I had a lot of respect for and credibility for, made a decision, and it involved a complex investigation, and he made the right call. The people involved made a complaint against him, and the officer is there, and so the complaint comes to me, and I look at it, and I believe that he did the right thing with what he knew at the time. So my boss, my boss looks at it and says, you need to rewrite your rationale in regards to, saying this lieutenant is not at fault. And I said, I'll look at it again. And I did, and I didn't change my mind. And so I called him, and I said, Chief, I said, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm not going to rewrite this. And if you disagree, your job is to what they call military endorsement, and you write yours, and then it'll go to the next level, and then the next level, and they'll decide whether my position or your position is correct. And so he thought that was insubordination, although there's a process for military endorsement. So he thought it was insubordination, and clearly he threatened me. And so, when you're a captain like that, you either maintain your position.
Yes.
That, where you're responsible for doing the right thing, or you give in, in the interest of your career.
Of course.
To your boss.
Yeah.
Who writes your ratings, by the way. And so I, that was a very tough decision for me. I was conflicted. I was still promotionally, interested in promoting.
Of course.
And so I knew that it could cost me. So, that calls to mind.
Did it cost you? You think? Now that you sit here and reflect today.
I got promoted 2-3 times after that.
Okay. So it wasn't that costly.
No, and I'm reminded that chief brought me back as a station commander for Wilshire. He actually called me up and said, "Hey, this is following the riots, the uprising," and he said the Wilshire division needs a lot of help, and I want you to accept being the station commander there. So he was the same guy who threatened me in the past. So
change
it up. In this case, no, didn't hurt me.
I have to ask you this because it's a question that I believe it's a yes answer, and I've been asking a lot of command staff officers because it's super important. You were a captain for 10 plus years. Is there a double standard?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no. I mean, it's not talked about, but yeah, clearly it's in the culture. It's in the discipline system. There's the double standard with promotions, coveted assignments, and discipline. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there are mistakes, and you got to own them when they happen and be honest about it. And it's not common that we don't get that kind of honesty.
What do you think we can do? Not necessarily us in general, but maybe the department, our beloved LAPD, or not just LAPD, any other department. Because I can tell you just from teaching at Savage Training Group, I teach up and down the state of California. We're getting ready to go out to out of state. I just spoke at a National Internal Affairs Association, Investigation Association out in Washington, D.C., and the sentiment is it's not just us. There is a double standard. And what really, I'm just, it's not that it gets to me, but what really just kind of just hits me at the core, if you will, is here we are 25, 30, 40 years later, and we still have this favoritism of double standard. Is there anything that we can do to, I suppose, minimize it or make it better? If any, I don't know that.
Yeah, as you say, it's been our history, and not only with the LAPD, but around the country.
Yes.
I view it as a moment of truth. Moment of truth. Are you going to, live your values, or not? And the culture is such where there is a pull not to live your values. Their pull is to what's best for me in this situation.
Yeah.
So
No, totally.
I wish I had a better solution to it.
No,
but-
you know what? It's tough. I don't ask every guest to come up with a solution, but I think it's okay to have this conversation where we can kind of figure out, like you said, sometimes you got to have the moment of truth. And here's another interesting point, because even if you tell the truth, so for example, and again, I'm going to sound very hypocritical here, or contradict, this, let's get rid of this double standard. But look, if I was a captain and I got a DUI, as an example, I don't know. I can tell you that if my chief says, you know what, Marlon, don't worry about it, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Do I counter and say, you know what, chief? No. Give me the same penalty that you would give the rank and file. I've never been in that predicament. Obviously, I've been retired for 2 years, and I made it to sergeant, but that's a tough one. And I'm not saying that you should do that or not. And I'm sure there is command staff officers out there that do have that moment of truth and be courageous and have that integrity and say, you know what, no, I don't want you to sweep it under the rug. What do you think?
Well, there are examples out there of not following the double standard, like the former sheriff of Davis County in Utah, Dub Lawrence. He parked his, he's the sheriff, he parked his car on the street to go in and get some ice cream, small town, comes back out, and a woman says, "You are illegally parked, Sheriff." And he acknowledges that, and he writes himself a ticket.
Interesting.
Now, that's not typical of a sheriff or many others. So I think, again, it's this, these moments of truth where you're confronted with, you're either following policy or following the law or following best practices, or you're not. And if you're not, own it. Yeah. That story about him circulated everywhere. The sheriff wrote himself a ticket. Wow. So I think, there's opportunities to really kind of set things straight and take a stand for what you believe in. Yeah, no, totally.
I appreciate you sharing all this, and I definitely appreciate the conversation. So let's move on. Okay. Next segment. Give me the worst incident in your career.
Wow.
That could be a radio call. It can be a call for service, a traffic stop.
I think, there were, looking back after 25 years, there were a number of them. I think the most difficult for me involved the death of one of my people, death of a police officer that was under my command. And
what was that all about?
Dealing with the family, as a captain, you're the one who is tasked with, giving the message to the family that, their husband, wife, son or daughter have been.
If you don't mind me asking, what were the circumstances?
During my career, there were 5 police officers who were in my commands. And I think the thing I remember, they were all extremely difficult, but the one I remember most was right before Christmas. A young police officer was involved in a gun battle. He only had like a couple years on the job. And his family lived 50 miles outside of Los Angeles. And
tried to get a hold of his wife and could not. We heard from a friend that she was out Christmas shopping for her and the kids. So we flew out there, it was, to meet her, and waited at her house, waited down the street for her to come home with presents and her children, young little toddlers. And I think that was one of the most difficult things for me, telling her. I mean, when I came up to the door and she opened the door, you could tell that she knew something was really wrong. And she didn't believe that her husband had been killed. She insisted on seeing him at the hospital. He was still at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took her to the hospital, and she spent a few minutes with him, and it was just gut-wrenching, and just a very
that's.
So I think those are the things
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing with that. Which is, every time I get to this segment, I cringe because people really don't understand what we really go through. Right. And when we share these type of stories, now you start realizing what police work really is, or functions, whether it's from a captain that has to tell a family that one of your officers was killed on the line of duty, or just a radio call, or serving your community.
It can happen,
and it can happen in a split second.
Yeah,
so
it can happen. One of the things I remember too is at academy graduations. When you have that 4 or 5 police officers are coming to your command, so you go to the academy graduation. And you meet them, and you meet their families. And one of the things the mothers always say is, "Take care of my boy," or "Take care of my daughter." Yeah. And you assure them that they've got the best training available, and there's a lot around supporting them, and and they have to be careful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's leave on a good note. Give me something good. Give me something funny, something good, something that you are very proud of, achievement, reward, award, or whatever you had in your career, man. I know there's got to be something there.
I think one of the most satisfying things. I mean, I had a lot of really satisfying things in the LAPD. No regrets. It was just a wonderful tour, and worked so many different jobs. And I think for me, when I was at Wilshire following the uprising, the morale was terrible. I mean, we had lost credibility with the Korean community. Wilshire served the big part of the Korean community. So they didn't believe us anymore. During the uprising, the police didn't respond. Business owners were on their roofs firing rounds at looters and stuff like that. So we looked for a process that could restore trust in the LAPD, and we found it. There was a nonprofit organization called the California Quality Service Commission. And it was a nonprofit, and they were dedicated to organizations who wanted to improve service. So we reached out to them, and they had an application process where people come in and assess you and all that stuff. So these people came in and assessed us and gave us kind of a blueprint for how we could get better.
Oh.
And we took that, and that was our strategic plan. And that led to, high increase in morale. We suddenly didn't have a waiting list to get in. Transformed my leadership with the rank and file. And we won consecutive quality awards in 94 and 95.
Oh, wow.
And, I think the big part of it was bonding with the rank and file.
Yeah.
As a station commander, if you were to ask rank and file officers, are you bonded with your station commander?
They'll probably say no.
No.
Yeah.
I don't actually
She's not even
want to
around.
go see him or her. So it was a huge benefit for me, and I remember that night, and we had like 50 or 60 of our officers there, and how proud they were of all that, and how proud I was. And so I remember that with just some great feelings about it.
God, that's awesome.
It was awesome.
Great to hear. Look, we're almost at the end. Captain, tell me, well, I'll leave the floor up to you. Look, any advice? Well, first and foremost, what are we doing today? What have we got going on? And you're working on any projects? So just let us know.
As you know, there's life after LAPD.
Yes.
So the question is, what do you do with that time? And, I got hired by an international organization development firm to specifically work with culture. How do you change corporate cultures? So I did that for 16 years, and then I started a book project, challenging, and on how to improve policing. How do you do that? And then the last thing is I finished a film and made the film festivals, and so I've been busy, and I appreciate the development that you get from being a police officer. And how it can lead to inspiration for other things after you leave.
Yeah.
So
like an internal
like
affairs.
this, yeah. And the other thing I want to say is,
how did
you give you give me and others the opportunity to talk about the real lived experience of being in policing. When you're in policing, you can't talk about it. You better not. And I wish more officers would talk about their real lived experience. It would be helpful.
Yeah, especially when it comes to discipline.
For sure.
It's a bit taboo. We just don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it is tough.
Yeah,
it is tough.
People are going to remember you when they see this episode about, you were a captain in Foothill and for 2.5 weeks, and they told you to leave.
Yeah,
because
told me to leave, and they told me, "Don't worry about it; it'll be all right."
It'll be all right.
And I go, "It doesn't look all right."
And no one knows. Nobody knows.
Because there's been documentaries about Rodney King
yes.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And, there's never a mention of really the good work that went on after that.
Yes.
The opportunity it provided
Yep.
to get things right, to own what happened,
Yep.
and to get things right.
Any advice, I'll leave the floor to you, you have for anyone who's coming on the job to become a cop?
Wow.
What would you tell them?
Well, it's so much, Marlon is so much different today than it was when I came on. I'd say, get a preparation, get an education, get some job experience, and most importantly, get family support for the difficult job you're about to take on. And if you do just those things, you get a good start. And then the other thing is, if you find that it's not for you, the job is not for you, leave. Leave it and go on to something else. Because it's so difficult and it's not for everyone.
Yeah. Captain, thank you so much for showing up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for the conversation. So good seeing you.
Yeah, likewise.
I feel like I have a big brother for life when we met, and for you to come here and show up and tell us your journey, I really, truly appreciate that. So on that note, we're going to wrap it up. And like always, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.